Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the replay if you're watching on the replay. Welcome to the live stream if you're watching live. We're doing the pre-show right now, so you can fast forward about 9 minutes or so if you don't want to sit through this with me configuring things and changing things on my website and letting everyone know what we're doing. I need to turn up my earpiece there, my monitor. Not really cans because they're in-ear monitors. Let's change the promo bar on the website. You can look over my shoulder while I do this. Let's change it to say my free Security Plus study group is right now. Click here to join us. And that should go to /live. And reset the cookie so people will see it even if they have hidden it earlier in the week, and save the changes. And it is updated. Oh, how are things looking outside? I have not looked lately at how things are going. Here's the bird feeder that's outside. This is at the Messer Studios. How nice. We can do a camera check while I'm doing this. Am I high enough? Am I close enough? I think so. There's the bird feeder. Here's me in the bird feeder. There we go. It's nice out. Look. There's no... Oh, we got a visitor already. And there he goes. He's in and out. Need to move the big yellow ball. And last camera is that one. Are people finding us? Are people online? Yes, they are. Hello, everyone. I see you there. Remember, you can go to professormesser.com/live for the chat. It's the live event chat. You can also open it up from anywhere on the website. What is going on there? He's flapping around. He's probably on the camera itself. I think I need to turn the bird feeder. My text is looking kind of weird there at the bottom, which is just overlaid on the screen. It's not on the actual bird feeder. I've got plenty of questions. Let's make sure we can get to the questions today. Is this working? Let's do Keynote. Can't really see what I'm doing. Let's do Keynote. There it is. And that should be here. So I should be able to hit the big green button and play. And look at that. It all works. I don't need that up. Okay. Life is good. Things are working. Oh, good. Thank you, Google Chrome, for providing a notification of the Security Plus study group. Let's see if I can adjust my chair enough to... Oh, are we going here? Yes, we're recording there. We're recording there. We're recording online. So that's all good. It's now up to me to actually have content. Well, that has its own challenges, doesn't it? It does indeed. Let's see. I don't have like a second. I should put a second one in there. This is the last study group of the month. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? It seems like it's dark in here because, well, it is dark in here because I have completely covered every window in here with drapes. Can't even see the drapes really from here. In fact, it looks like it's really bright here. Look how bright. It's all bright in the studio, and then not really. It's bright right here. You can't see the lights. There are two LED lights here, two LED floods that are flooding my noggin. And then there's two floods that are basically right next to me on the sides. And those are the ones that are lighting the background. In fact, I should be able... Let's turn off the background lights. Let's see what happens. We'll have some fun here while we're waiting, since I seem to be in order. Let's view... where do I need to go? I need to go to my bookmarks. I need to go turn on lights. This is all handled through an APC power unit that is IP addressable, has a web service on the front of it. And I can turn off my backlights just by clicking a few buttons and saying, turn off immediately. So without those lights, yeah, it is kind of dark, isn't it? Yeah, I've covered all of the windows in here because when I'm recording, it could be any time of the day. And I need all of the videos to look exactly the same, regardless of what time I recorded them. So I don't rely on any background lighting, any outside lighting at all. It's all artificial. All right, the tweet went out, so I know that worked. Good. We can make that full screen here. And move some things around and get rid of that and change this thing. But it is kind of nice when you close up all of the drapes. The drapes not only keep the light out, they're blackout drapes. So they not only keep the light out, but they also minimize any sound in here. If you were to stand in here, you know, with my earphones out so I could actually hear the room, it's a pretty dead room. There's not a lot of echo in here. So that helps. Do I have a lot of smart home technology? I guess these days it depends on what a lot is. I don't think I have a lot. I don't have one of these houses that is completely wired up with every possible thing in every room, et cetera, et cetera. But I do have a way to know and manage my garage doors, so I know if they're up or down. I get alerted if they get opened. I can open them remotely. I have Nest for my AC and heating, so I can manage. You've probably seen in other study groups I've been here managing the temperature in the studio because it gets warm or cold, or after the first hour it thinks I'm not here anymore. It's hidden behind one of the drapes. And what else do I have in my house? I have a lot of cameras around the studio. I have a lot of cameras around the house to protect things. That's good. The little Cylon lights down here that are rotating are a recorder from Blackmagic. So that is actually recording 2 video streams right now. It's recording the one you're seeing, which if you look next to me, there's 2 little tiny screens underneath my monitor. The first little tiny screen is the one that's on standby, and then the second little tiny screen is the one you're seeing. So it is recording both of those. I'm recording both of those because that's normally how I record when I am doing my videos. I record what's on the screen and I record my head. And then afterwards, I merge those together and do the video editing. So I've just gotten to where I record both of them. That way, if something does happen, right now they're being recorded in case I do need to have video backup. Normally, I do not. Normally, I finish the study group and whatever's online and uploaded in there in real time, that's what you see as a replay. But if I do need to go back, if something happened and I need to change things or edit out a piece of it or add something, I can do that because I've got both of the standby and the available. I use that for also the podcast audio. I just rip the audio off the video, put it into an audio editor, and when you download the podcasts at professormesser.com/podcasts, then that's what you hear is what's recorded there. Well, I think we may do a study group. I think we will. The starter question today on Socrative is about cake. So hopefully you've seen that. I know. I'll explain why in a moment. You've probably figured it out by now if you're familiar. Let's check real quick. Make sure YouTube is okay. That everybody's good. Everybody is good. Welcome, everybody. Let's get started with the Security Plus study group. Got 10 seconds. We'll figure out all these buttons. What goes next? What do I push? How does this work? Get rid of things on my screen. We can get rid of the bird feeder, free up a little bit of room there. And let's start the study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2017 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. It is our last study group of the month. We usually do one of these every week. Usually it's the first, second, and third week of the month. It changes occasionally. You do have to watch the calendar, but we do an A+, a Network Plus, now finally the Security Plus. And this is a bit of a long month, so I get a week off here at the end. And now we start again next month with the entire group of Security Plus study groups and others next month. Thanks for joining us. My name is James Messer. I will be your host for this first hour of interactive Q&A all about the Security Plus exam objective content. So all of the topics we'll be discussing, all of the questions I'll be asking you come directly from the SY0401 Security Plus exam. I'll talk all about that. There's also directions on the website on how to get to our Q&A. In fact, it's professormesser.com/QA. We'll get you to our QA. That's something that's only available to you in real time. You have to watch this live to be able to do that. If you're not watching this live, if it's a replay, just follow along. You'll be able to see everything on the screen that everyone else is doing. There's a lot that is going on here, but if you've ever wanted to see more about Security Plus, of course, every single one of my Security Plus videos, every minute of every video, the entire training class is available online. You can find that some people may want to have an offline version. Sometimes you're not online all the time. Maybe you have limited bandwidth. There is a version you can purchase. You can even purchase the audio only if you wanted to take it in the car with you. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/GetSecPlus. It also comes with my course notes. We'll talk about the course notes in a bit as well. Of course, we can always know what's going on here by following what's happening on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/YouTube, which just this month we surpassed 200,000 subscribers. So thank you so much for your support on the YouTube channel. It actually has been pretty nice to have that support. I now have a person at YouTube I can talk to for any problems, questions, ideas. Also, don't forget, don't pay full price for your vouchers. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers for a 10% discount right off the top. Why would you pay full price? There's also some Security Plus questions available on my website at professormesser.com/popquiz. It's questions that I archive from this study group, and they are all applicable to the latest SY0401 exam. So make sure you have a look at those. Those are free and available, and hundreds of questions are out there in 20 question chunks. So you can really go through it and see how much of this content do I really know. There's also an audio replay version. You can, of course, come back to YouTube at any time and watch the video replay. Some people like to have an audio-only version. I get that. So you can find out more about that at professormesser.com/podcasts. Podcasts, and you'll see podcasts there for the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. There's players built into the page, or you can use whatever podcast application you prefer. I'm going to ask you questions today, and you're going to answer them. And you're going to know the answer. I'm telling you now. The way that you participate is you can open up a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA, which will take you right to the question page. You can just stay on that page for the entire study group. If you have a mobile device, you'd like to use that device, there are mobile apps available on the App Store and Google Play. You can download the Socrative student app, and you can go out there and it will ask you for a room name, and you type in the very long room name of Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. If you do all of that properly, you'll see a question out there that says, what is the most popular birthday cake flavor? Well, that's not a very good Security Plus question, is it? Well, it's not intended to be. This is our test question. Let's see if you're able to get into Socrative. Let's see if you're able to answer some of the questions that are there. A number of you are, because you'll see the possible answers of lemon, carrot, vanilla, chocolate, cheesecake, and, of course, funfetti. And right now, chocolate is winning just a little bit. 47% of respondents say that chocolate is the most popular birthday cake flavor. 33% say that vanilla is the most popular birthday cake flavor. Is it really, though? What is that? Why would that be the case? Let's see if that's really the case. I wonder what the possible answers are. Well, I have the possible answers, of course. Hopefully, you're able to see this question. You're able to answer the question. And if you are, just stay on that page. You don't have to move for the rest of the study group. Again, if you're watching this in the replay, this will not be available to you, so you can't use that. Well, if we look at the most popular flavors of birthday cake as compiled by Spoonful magazine, of course, the very popular Spoonful magazine, you can see the number one at the top there is indeed chocolate. Chocolate is number one. Number two is cheesecake. Number three, chocolate chip. Vanilla, number four. How did that happen? What happened there? Red velvet, marble, carrot, lemon, coconut, and funfetti finish the list. And funfetti's at the bottom. That doesn't sound fun to me. But I mention this because today, August the 23rd, National Sponge Cake Day. See, there's the link. There's always a link there on those first questions. Well, we've got plenty of Security Plus questions next. So there are no more cake questions. Sadly, there are no more cake questions. I have plenty of Security Plus questions for you. I have gotten about 4 emails already this morning about this topic right here. So I want to be very, very clear with folks that the SY0401 exam is the one that was released in 2014. So it's a little bit long in the tooth right now. It will be retired in July of 2018. So we've got about a year before SY0401 goes away. In fact, right now, it's the only thing you can take is the SY0401, the SY0501, and these are exam versions. The exam version SY0501 will be released on October the 4th of this year. So look at that overlap between October the 4th of this year and July of next year. You'll be able to take either one of these. Now, it really doesn't matter which one you take. These are exams. These have nothing to do with the certification. Whether you take the SY0401 or SY0501, you get exactly the same cert. This is really referring to the version of questions that you're going to get on the exam. You'll get one exam. It's 90 minutes long. You might get 90 questions maximum. And the passing score is a 750 in this odd range between 100 and 900. But the questions I saw today were that people saw that the new version is going to be released on October the 4th. Should I really even start my certification process if the new version's coming out? The answer, of course, is yes. So I think a lot of people think that the current version of the exam goes away in October. It's August now. So in a couple months, it's going to disappear. It will not. You have a year or so before the current exam version ever disappears. One of the challenges you'll find that if you're going to wait for the new version of the exam to come out, it may be a bit difficult to find study materials on day one. Usually it takes a little bit of time to get all of the study materials out. And indeed, it's probably going to take me months to get all of my videos finally done for the 501 exam. And why would you wait to study and get this exam? That's 2 months of time when you could be studying towards your certification. It's much more important to get that certification than it is to wait and just take another different set of questions. I don't know why that's a very interesting thing to think about, but the goal of getting the certification is so that you can get a job or get a better job or learn more in your field and be something that's going to propel you to a higher level within your career. So absolutely, you should take the current exam if you're studying today. Now, if you're watching this video 2 months from now and the new version's about to come out and you think or you're seeing that there are enough study materials for you, then you may decide to take the 501. But at least at that point, you have a decision. You can take either one because you have plenty of time, plenty of ramp available. The Security Plus exam is primarily a multiple choice question exam, but there are some questions at the beginning of the exam that CompTIA calls performance-based questions. These are really questions that are anything but multiple choice. It could be matching, it could be fill in the blank, it could be putting things into a particular order. There's all kinds of different types of performance-based questions you may be faced with. So on the exam, just remember when you hit that first question and you're expecting a multiple choice and it's nothing like a multiple choice, don't worry. You're going to get a handful of those and then the rest of the exam will be multiple choice. In fact, I usually tell people you may want to skip over the performance-based questions because you can go to any question on the exam at any time with CompTIA. So skip over those. Take all the multiple choice. That'll allow you to settle in, maybe even remember some things by going through the multiple choice. And when you circle back to the performance-based, maybe there's things in your mind now you remember and you can answer the questions a little bit better. That's one strategy. It's completely up to you on how you like to go through these exams and work through them. Well, in that vein, with that style of idea, the first question I have for you today is a performance-based question. So if you're already at Socrative, make sure that you're on the screen right now and you'll be asked a question about what port numbers should be configured in your firewall to allow these traffic flows. So this is kind of a multiple choice, well, not really multiple choice, a fill in the blank. It's really a fill in the blank question because I'm not giving you what they could be. You really need to know these answers. So I have 4 different traffic flows here, and I'm looking for what port numbers you would configure in a firewall. The first traffic flow is A, transfer a file between hosts without encryption. So you've got to figure out what you would use there to be able to do that. There may be multiple options there, but there's really one good one to use there, one that's obvious, especially if you're thinking about the port numbers that are in the Security Plus exam objectives. Flow B is to allow legacy Windows file transfers. So that's something we need to think about. C is to send mail from a mobile device. Port number would I use for that? And D is to securely browse the internet. What port number would I use for that one? So this is, by the way, directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. So this is something that should immediately be familiar to you. If you think you know the answers, go to professormesser.com/QA. Do not answer in the chat room. You want to answer online. You want to think, if you don't know what they are, take a stab, take a guess at it. That's something that can only help you on the exam, is taking a guess. If you take a guess and you get a question wrong on the exam, it doesn't count against you. They don't take points away because you guessed and you got it wrong. If you leave it blank, you don't get any points. So being able to fill in and answer every single question can only help you. That's how we believe this is supposed to work in that scenario. So what port numbers would you put into this mix? And a lot of people are answering already. I'm looking at the port number. Some of you are spot on with this. In fact, I probably answer B might even have a couple of different port numbers associated with it, which I will accept. This is not something set in stone. Makes me think you might be thinking about these. Sending mail from a mobile device, all of these are interesting, but you know what they are. I'm not going to show these because they're coming up on the screen and people are answering these already, but maybe you know what some of these port numbers might be. And one good question, of course, I'm asking for just port numbers, but what protocol are these? You might even want to think about that. Is the protocol all the same for all of these? It might be. It might not be. There's a couple. In fact, A, I know there would be at least 3 different port numbers you might put there, which would still be correct. B would be at least 2 there that might be correct. C, there's really 1 that fits that description. And in D, securely browse the internet, really only 1 there. So you've got some options. At least maybe you even thought of 1. There might be others there that you could use. Let's have a look at what I came up with. I put these as my answers, but you could put anything into this list. The first one, transferring a file between hosts without encryption, could be TFTP, which I did not put in this list, which would be TCP port, or would it be UDP port? It could be either. I've seen it in different ways, but most of the time it's TCP 469, but FTP is TCP 20 and TCP 21. Both of those are used in an FTP file transfer protocol between hosts without encryption. We've got allowing legacy Windows transfers is one of the older NetBIOS that's embedded within, it's encapsulated within TCP/IP, and it's TCP 139 that is associated with that. I would also take TCP 138 because it might be UDP related. That would be a UDP 138. Make sure when you're configuring your firewall that you put TCP and UDP, make sure you put the right protocols along with the right port numbers, which is pretty important. You've got SMTP, which is really the way most people will send mail from a mobile device, although I would have taken the SNMP-S, the secure version of that as well. But TCP 25 is the one that's in the Security Plus exam objectives. That's, of course, what you need to remember for your exam. And then D, securely browse the internet. I think almost everybody got this one right, which is TCP 443 for that SSL and being able to do that. This is whenever you start looking at what port numbers you need to have in this list. They really are right in the exam objectives. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives. It lists out everything you need to know from a port number perspective. I've seen people studying pages and pages and pages of port numbers and applications, not realizing that it's actually a very small group. And that very small group is contained within the exam objectives. Make sure you have those. Pretty important. So, but for these 4, I think that's a good start. That's a good one to be configuring a firewall. And of course, in the exam, you may be asked to configure firewall settings with all of those. So make sure you know the answer to that as well. Let's do some multiple choice now. We've gotten through our performance-based part of the exam. Let's jump into doing something that's a little more multiple choice. And here's our multiple choice question, and the question is, Which of these attack types commonly affects large groups of people simultaneously? Which of these attack types commonly affects large groups of people simultaneously? Would it be A, farming, B, MITM, whatever that is? I'm playing stupid. C is phishing, D is a Christmas tree attack, and E is tailgating. One of these attack types commonly affects large groups of people simultaneously. Which would it be? If you think you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You want to answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. It's an easy way to get to Socrative. You can, of course, go to Socrative and click the student login and type in the room name, Professor Messer, PROFESSORMESSER, and finally you're in there, but so much easier just to type professormesser.com/QA and being able to answer that. I'm going to take a sneak peek at how we're doing with this one as well. This is one that I think a lot of people don't think about because we always think about attacks from our perspective. In this particular question, I'm asking about an attack that's across a very large group of people all at the same time. So it's a pretty unique environment to be working through and answering that particular problem. Let's see what we've got so far, though. Let's see how we've done on this one. Well, 46% of folks, almost 50%, have said phishing. As many of you know in my study groups, I like to get up to 50% of an answer right, and then all of the rest would be jumbled incorrect answers. I try to make them at least that difficult. Number 2 on the list with 30% is farming with the PH at the beginning. Both phishing and farming are not spelled right. They're spelled funny with the PH at the beginning. 18% in third place is D, Christmas tree attack. And then single digits for man in the middle. That's what the MITM is. And tailgating. Hardly anybody said tailgating for that one too. And I think the two that you specify, those single digits, you're probably right by not choosing those. So let's see how we did. What would the answer be? It would be farming. Farming is when you have maybe a way to, here's a good example of farming. You're redirecting people to a site that really is not the right site. So maybe somebody's got access to your DNS server and they've configured a new IP address and they're sending everybody over to this new server. Boy, that's a bad one, isn't it? You don't want to be in that situation. Or maybe they have embedded across multiple devices simultaneously a vulnerability. They put something using a vulnerability onto a device, and that exploit has now sent everybody to a different site. That's a little more difficult to do. The DNS is a really good example of farming. DNS redirection. So this farming is when we have now everybody who goes to your website now is going somewhere else. That's a very large group of people. And of course, the question I asked was something that affects a large group of people. The phishing is something that's usually very directed, or it's a single email. It might be a group of emails, but they're really trying to affect a single person at a time. So that is not what we were asking about in this particular question. We've all seen the phishing emails. We know how difficult it is to avoid those. And of course, because this is something that often is outside the scope of your personal computer, somebody changing a DNS, for example, antivirus, anti-malware is not going to see that because it looks like it's a normal conversation. Now, on that server they're sending you to, if that happens to have some bad software on it and you're downloading it onto your browser, maybe then you would identify that something weird is going on. But the actual process of redirecting you to the new server, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how DNS is supposed to work. That's how all of those things are supposed to work. Doesn't make sense for an antivirus or anti-malware to identify a problem with that. So if we look at the answers we had, 30% of us that said farming, who chose A, farming, got this one correct. So that's something that you do run into problems with. The phishing, although people in the chat room are saying, but phishing campaigns can affect a lot of people. But the real challenging part of this is that I'm asking you one that commonly affects large groups of people, and the keyword simultaneously. Phishing is not a simultaneous function. So that's one where it really would not be phishing. That's not commonly done simultaneously. Farming, however, absolutely done simultaneously. Whenever you start looking through all of those. Christmas tree attack is something dealing with protocol in the IP stack. So that is not something that really are affecting large groups of people either. That's a very directed attack to a very specific device. and working through those. Tailgating, obviously, one person at a time, maybe two people going through on tailgating. Probably wouldn't see three, so that's certainly not large groups of people. And man in the middle is usually a very directed type of attack as well whenever you're working through those. Farming is a way to gather or redirect large groups of people simultaneously. One way of doing that is modifying a DNS or spoofing a DNS. So that's one of the ways you might want to think about how farming is used in a real world situation. Probably one of the most common ways you would be able to farm is by redirecting that DNS. Let's do another question. Let's see if we got one that we can work through this time. This one deals with data. And our question is, which of these best describes data in transit? Which of these best describes data in transit? Would it be A, health records stored in a MySQL database, B, address information cached in a CPU register, C, password database contained on a laptop SSD, D is a credit card validation when buying an item on Amazon, and E, application library data stored on a backup tape at a remote storage facility. One of these best describes data in transit. This is an important concept that you do have to understand. It is on the Security Plus exam objectives. You should absolutely think about what that possible answer might be. If you think you know what the answer might be, you need to go to professormesser.com/QA if you're watching this live and be able to answer that. Don't answer in the chat room. You want to see how you do with this particular answer. Is this one we're going to bounce back on? Are we going to know the answer to this one? Was the first one too hard? Was that the way it went? We gave you the tough one right off the bat. Well, not to worry, because we have some I think most of you are pretty good with the idea of data in transit. Well, in fact, let's see how good we are with the concept of data in transit. How do we do? Wow, 89% of us, I completely failed when dealing with this particular problem. This is one whenever you start looking through, where can I find the answer? Well, that one jumps right out at you. Or does it? Is this the right answer? Were we all fooled? Let's find out. So 88% of you chose D, credit card validation when buying an item on Amazon. So obviously single digits for everything else, storing records in a database, address information, a CPU register, password database contained on a laptop SSD, application library data stored on a backup tape. This is one where whenever you start looking through knowing what these answers are, maybe it's something you can work through and know what those are. So let's see what the actual answer is. I, of course, have the answer here, and it probably is going to make a lot more sense when we start looking through these. Data in transit was the question. This is data that is being transmitted. It's currently moving over the network. It's also, as you can see here, talks about data in motion. You may hear people talk about that as well. Data in motion and data in transit are the ones whenever you start looking through, how can I see this information? This is where it really does help to be able to know where to look. And if you're looking for data in transit, you're going to need to be on the network. In many cases, this data could be going over very long distances, which means anywhere along the way, somebody may be looking into these packets that are going over the network. They're gathering the frames. So you've got switches and routers and all kinds of different devices along the path where somebody could be looking into the data to find out more about what's happening. And for that reason, we generally will encrypt. We'll either encrypt using SSL in our browser. Maybe we're encrypting using something like IPsec, where we can build an encrypted tunnel that's always available between two sites, and everything between those two sites is encrypted. So it just depends on what makes sense for you, what type of security you're looking for or makes sense for what you're doing. Data in transit, though, absolutely would be data going over the network. So if we look at the possible answers, only 1% said health records are stored in a MySQL database. Well, they're on a database. They're not going over the network unless we access the database. But records that are stored, that would be data at rest. So it's not actually something that's going across the network in that particular description. We have 2% of you said password database contained on a laptop SSD. Again, the data is at rest. It's not going across the network. Application library data stored on a backup tape at a remote storage facility. That's very much data at rest. I think that's one wherever you start looking at that's not going anywhere. It's certainly not over a network. And 5% said address information cached in a CPU register. That's the data there is not going across the network, so it would not be data in transit in that scenario. This is one where you start trying to figure out the details of what we do. This is where we need to know the differences between these, because we'll use different technologies to look at data in different places. If the data is at rest, there's a different set of technologies we would use to protect it versus data that is in motion. So it's pretty important to know all of those. So of course, the answer was credit card validation when buying an item on Amazon. For those of you not familiar with the credit card process, when you're buying something on Amazon and you hit that buy button, there's a process that takes place behind the scenes that doesn't involve your computer at all. Amazon communicates to a clearinghouse for the credit card that you're using, says, here's the credit card information I got, here's the name of the person, here's the address they used, here is the numbers that were on the credit card and the expiration date, the important values that are processed. They are sent off to the credit card clearinghouse, and that's who approves the transaction. They send a message back to Amazon saying, well, the transaction's approved, or it's not. And then Amazon informs you, finally, if that transaction went through. That's why you always see the button, don't click more than once, because you don't want multiple transactions going through for a single one, being able to work through it. That's whenever you start looking at all of the different things that you could run into on the exam, this is a lot that you could find. And if you've looked at my videos, there are over 200 Security Plus videos that are out there. And I highly recommend when you're watching those videos that you take plenty of notes as you're going through. But with that many videos, you may not have time to go through 200 plus videos and take the notes. Or maybe you're just not a good note taker. Maybe you're like me. You can't read anything that you've written down. You have to write in big block letters so you're able to read it afterwards. Cursive is not in your repertoire. And if that's the case, you may want to consider my course notes. I've already gone through the videos. I've already taken all of the text, all of the graphics, and put them into a single document. And these are my Security Plus course notes. It's a 35 pages of notes that you will have there. There's an introduction and table of contents. I'm not counting those in those 35 pages. The 35 pages are the notes themselves, and they have everything from every video. If you're someone who just likes to have notes available, that's something that might help you, although no longer $10. That number has changed. I need to update my slide there. We just updated the price to 15 because I updated the number of pages in the course notes. They used to be 10 pages long, and made sense to have the lower price there. But you can find out more about that at ProfessorMesser.com/securitycn. You can also get a book version of the Security Plus course notes. They used to be digital only, but now you can get everything in a book. So if you want port numbers, there's your port number list right there. It's very bright because I've got the light on. There's the port number list in the book. And all the text, the Security Plus exam's a lot of text. So all of the text of these are in here too. So there's plenty to go through, and they're very small. You don't have to worry about all of the tiny printing here. I've really tried to cram everything into a small group. A little bit extra for the book because it costs a lot of money to print things. But some people like to have a printed version. I've effectively kind of passed on the cost of the printing. I don't really add much. So if you buy the book, you get both the book and you get the digital that you can download immediately. So you can download the digital version right now, and then you can wait and I will ship to you the book itself. So that's something you get both of those. So even though it costs a little more, maybe that's a little bonus for all of those. And of course, one of the nice things that's associated with this is that every dollar of this goes back to the website. So a lot of people will say, I want to help support the site. Do you take donations? I don't take donations. It's one of those things where I prefer that you get something for what you are purchasing. I want you to be able to get something for the money that you spent. So hopefully these course notes would be something that makes sense for you as well. If you've already purchased the course notes, I mentioned that the price went up from $10 to $15. But if you've already purchased the course notes or you have the previous 401 version before I added the other additional features, you can always log into your user login your member login on the website, and just download the latest version. So the SY0401, if you bought SY0401, if I make any changes to SY0401, you always get updates to that. So you can find out more about that at professormesser.com/securitycn. I've said enough about that already. Thank you also for your support with that. Thank you for purchasing the course notes. Thank you for supporting the site. I would not be able to keep this going. And this is all I do. This is my full-time job. So I would not be able to do it without your help. Thank you so much for that. Let's do more questions. I've got another one here for you. This question deals with databases, sort of. Deals with users more than databases, I think. The question is, which of the following would be the best way to authenticate users against a third-party database? Which would be the best way to authenticate users against a third-party database? I have some multiple choices for you, though. It's A, Radius, B, SAML, C, Kerberos, D is LDAP, and E is TACACS. One of these would be the best way. All of these, by the way, are ways to authenticate users, which only complicates things further. But only one of them in this list would be the one that I could use, or would be the best one that I could use to authenticate users against a third-party database. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. You might have even known that one before seeing the multiple choice come up. You already know the answer to some of those. You just need to find it in the list. Hopefully that's the point you'll get to when you're sitting for the exam and things are asked on the exam. You already know what they're asking for. Just don't go too fast. Sometimes I think I know what they're asking for and I answer. And then when I go back through the questions, because I try to finish in enough time that I could go back to every question that I was not 100% sure about, and I try to go through every question, and I reread the questions, and sometimes I realized I forgot the word. There was a word "not" in the question, which changes the answer completely. So sometimes going back over the questions can really help you a bit. You just don't want to get hung up on that. Then you get to the questions, of course, where you've answered, and then you could go either way, and the second time through you're thinking, I should change that. And I always wonder, I never change it, by the way. If I'm waffling back and forth, I always go with my first answer. And I don't know if that helps me or not. But I try to think that, yes, if I'm not quite sure, I'm going with what I thought the first time. I hardly ever change that. Let's see how we did with answering this question. Well, we're a little torn. We're all over the place as far as user authentication is concerned. 32% of us, though, said Radius. That was the #1 answer. The #2 answer was Kerberos. Really a tie for third with 18 and 17% respectively between SAML and LDAP. And then only 6% of folks said TACACS. This is a challenge, of course, on the exam, is that you are really expected to know a lot about user authentication. And I would imagine a number of you have probably never done any user authentication on these devices before. So a lot of it is really conceptual when you're trying to figure out what is the right answer with these. So let's have a look at the possible answers and what we did, which was, I guess Radius was #1 here. But what I was looking for, because on this particular question, I'm asking about authenticating against a third-party database, third party. And so that would be SAML, the Security Assertion Markup Language. This is one of the ways that you could authenticate someone without actually having a database of those users at your site. You see this a lot, although it's probably not SAML that's being used on a lot of sites these days. You see this a lot if you go to a site that says you can log into this site using Google. You could log into this site using your Facebook authentication. And you're thinking to yourself, how do they have all of the Facebook users to authenticate against? How do they have all the Google users to authenticate against? Well, they don't. What they do is simply send information over to Google. Once they've given the authentication information, they've checked in with the Google database and the Facebook database in a secure way so that you can make sure that those things are available to authenticate even though you don't have those users. This authentication process makes it really easy. Usually you need a service provider, so you need access to that service provider. The client, of course, which is the person who's probably trying to authenticate. And then with SAML, it's called the identity provider. That's the people that have the credentials. That would be the Google or the Facebook or the third party that you're authenticating against. Really an interesting process, although my head's in the way. You can kind of see there is a server there at the top where the client is asking for information from the resource server. The resource server says, you're going to need to ask Google about that. I'm not going to let you in. If you want to use Google authentication, go get a ticket from them. And so what you end up doing is logging in with Google or using your existing login with Google, and Google hands you back a token, a SAML token. So you've not ever sent your authentication information to the third party, to the primary client that you're trying to log into. Everything is between you and Google. Everything is between you and Facebook. So it's very nice that you have that security associated with that. You then provide the token to the resource server, and the resource server confirms that token did come, checks in with Google or checks in with Facebook and says, okay, that must have come from there. The token checks out. Therefore, I'm going to allow you access. So very, very nice to have that there and being able to have those capabilities. And SAML is one of the very common ways. There are multiple ways to do this, but SAML's in this particular list was the only common way to authenticate against a third-party database. So this is one where with Radius, with Kerberos, with LDAP, with TACACS, those are all authentication methods. We could use them to authenticate against a third-party database, but very rarely are those technologies used to do that. Almost always it's SAML so that you don't have to send the third-party information to the original site. You could just send it to the third party. And a nice way to do it, though. A nice, simple process, one that's built into a lot of web front ends. You don't have to do a lot of coding. You just point people over to Google. If you logged into my chat, you could authenticate with Facebook. I think you can authenticate with Google, or you could use a local username and password, because a lot of people either don't have Facebook or Google, or they don't want to use their Facebook or Google because they don't know that it's actually a secure process. And I understand that. So you can use that database as well. And hopefully I'll be able to integrate all of this together on my site too. So you can have a single user login to do those things whenever you work through it. So if we go back to our list, 22% of us said SAML. So I did not succeed there at getting a question that half of you would know. But if you didn't get this one correct, now you know the differences between SAML and all of these other authentication technologies. So if you run into that again, you'll know what that is referring to. Let's shift gears a bit. I've got another one. Oh, by the way, at the bottom of all these slides, I don't know if you noticed, that I've got where this came from. So if you want to know more information, I always have the objective number 5.1 and the name of my video, which is SAML. I have a SAML video out there. So you'd be able to do that and work through it. And certainly one of those things you should think about. Let's go to another question. Which of these would best describe 3DES? I'm definitely not using the right nomenclature there. I'm not saying it right on purpose, but that's the question. Which of these would best describe 3DES? Would it be A, an asymmetric encryption cipher? Would it be B, a hash function? Would it be C, a symmetric encryption cipher? Would it be D, a one-time pad? Or would it be E, a transport encryption algorithm? Which of these would best describe 3DES? It just makes you cringe when I say it that way, doesn't it? It's not what you normally hear that said that way. Maybe you know the answer to this one. This is one where all of these things are real. A one-time pad is a real thing. A hash function is a real thing. Asymmetric encryption is real. Symmetric encryption is real. Transport encryption algorithms are real. But which one is this? That's a real challenge whenever you start working through these. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and put it in there. Don't put it in the chat room. And no hints, please. In the chat room, we're going to pretend that we're on the exam. We need to answer this one ourselves. We need to see how we do with this one. Maybe we do know the answer to this one. 3DES. One of the challenges with these technologies is they're used in so many different ways. So you really have to know the foundation of what it is, and then you can apply other things on top of that when you're working through it. Let's see how we did. How did we do? Well, we've got 48% of folks said it was C, symmetric encryption cipher. 27% of respondents said A, asymmetric encryption cipher. 17% said E, transport encryption algorithm. And then we've got single digits for B, hash function, and D, one-time pad. So which one of these would be really the best option for calling this? Well, this is DES and triple DES. That's what this stands for. It's not 3DES. What was I doing? It says 3DES, but we call it triple DES. DES or DES is the data encryption standard. It's been around for a while, from the 1970s. Can you believe it? DES was created along that time frame. It has been around for a while. We don't use DES any longer. The keys are very small, 56 bits. Effectively, the keys are 56 bits. There's some checksums in there that make it up to 64 bits. But the actual key itself, 56 bits, you could hack, you could brute force a DES key these days, probably with your iPhone. So that's a reason why we don't use DES any longer. But what if we were able to take DES and effectively encrypt it 3 times? Use the same technology, the same methodology to be able to use this, but encrypt it multiple times, multiple passes through. So every time you encrypt it, it makes it a little more difficult. That's a very broad description of really what's going on. It's a little more complex in the first, the second, and the third time through, but it is effectively you're taking that data and making changes to it 3 times. That's the 3 in the triple DES. A lot of people no longer even using triple DES. One of the latest encryption methodologies out there is AES. This is a symmetric encryption cipher. So when we start trying to figure out how do we use these, this is what we use. Once we have a key, we can now use that same key on both sides to be able to encrypt the data and decrypt it when it gets to the other side. So if you answered, 48% of you, finally, we hit that 50% mark that said symmetric encryption cipher. You got that one absolutely right. Well done. Would not be an asymmetric encryption cipher. We use exactly the same key with triple DES that we do when we encrypt the data as when we decrypt the data. Now, how we get the key to the other side is often done by putting it inside of asymmetric encryption and sending it to the other side. But once it's finally on that side and we start using triple DES, it is a symmetric encryption function. Those ciphers are used always for symmetric encryption. Just something to think about as you're going through and trying to figure out the details of how do I use this technology? Where does it come from? You really do need to know the encryption that's out there. Make sure you go through the exam objectives and you know how to do that. Maybe you're somebody who prefers more hands-on, trying to understand encryption. Is it asymmetric? Is it symmetric? Is it IPsec? Is it SSL? Maybe it's something that gets embedded into your brain better if there's an actual lab. And I get that because there's certainly ways that you could use these labs to be able to get what I call muscle memory. You're typing things into the lab and working with it. So that's where whenever I start working, I like to set it up, maybe build my own IPsec tunnel, work with the phase 1 options, the phase 2 options, send some data from point A to point B. It's a good way to try things out. The folks at GTS Learning have created an entire series of labs to be able to do this that are using real hardware, real operating systems. It's a complete virtual environment that runs inside of your browser. You can follow the lab or you can go off and do something else in that operating system because it's a real system. It's not a simulation. This is a true virtualized environment. And you don't have to load any hardware. There's no software to load. You simply go to your browser, connect to the website. There's nothing to download. There's nothing to make work. I've got some of this on my computer right now. I'm running one of these labs. This is the labs for compliance, user rights and permissions. This is an introductory lab, and all of the servers are powering up right now. You can see when they power up, it's a Windows machine. I'm just in my browser. I'm using Google Chrome on my browser right now. And now we've got this machine that just started. I'll go to the control panel. It's plenty fast. It's like I've got in fact, it's faster than the Windows machine that I have sitting in my desk that's local to me right now. It's much faster than that. And there are multiple machines here. So you don't have to use just these 2. If you wanted to go to a different machine, you've got other machines here that you can connect to. So now effectively, instead of having all of this equipment piled up on your desk, you've got all of this equipment that's effectively piled up now virtually. So here's a Windows 8 device that you can work through. And now you've got all the same functions and all the same capabilities on this Windows device. I'm going to change my account picture. That's not part of the lab, but notice I can go through and use all of the functions for this lab just like I was using it in front of me. It's a nice system to have available, and there's a special price on it too. If you follow this link, you don't pay the full price. You don't pay $169, you pay $109 by going to professormesser.com/seclabs. This also comes with the GTS Learning book, which I use to help make my videos. It comes with GTS Learning questions and answers. There's a lot of good things in there, and certainly worth checking out. If this is something you think you might be able to use, have a look. Go to professormesser.com/seclabs, and you'll be able to try those out for yourself. They're a lot of fun to play around with. I sometimes will go in there and do some screenshots and work through a few things. If I've got a question, does the registry work like this? Should I change that setting? I'll go in and try it out in the virtual environment. Let's do another question. I've got one right here. This one dealing with a flood. The question is, which of the following would be the best prevention of a network flood? The best prevention of a network flood. I have multiple choices here that you choose from. Would the best prevention of a network flood be A, a router? Would it be B, a switch? Would it be C, a repeater? Would it be D, an IPS? Or would it be E, an ACL? One of those would really be the best prevention of a network flood. Maybe you know what the answer is. If you do, go to professormesser.com/QA. Maybe you're somebody who's managing a network now. You know how to stop a flood. So one of these might be absolutely the way to do it. I think whenever I look at all of these, this is one where you do need to know what those possible answers are. This is whenever I start looking and trying to figure out what am I going to put in my network to help solve some of these problems I'm running into. This is certainly something you should consider, is knowing which one of these. You may be asked in your exam, here's a scenario you're running into. What is the best way to resolve this problem? Or what is the best way to prevent this issue from happening? So you need to know what all these devices are. You need to know what a router does, a switch does, a repeater, an IPS, an ACL, and really what their core functionality is. And if you don't know that, well, there's an opportunity to read through, because all of those are in the CompTIA exam objectives. Of course they are. Of course they're real. Didn't make anything else up with that question. How do we do with this one? Let's have a look at the results. 47% of us, number one, still not a majority, but pretty close to 50%, said IPS. 21% said router, and 18% said switch, almost a tie for second. In third place would be ACL, which was selection E, and then only 3% said C, repeater. This is one thing that you absolutely need to know about, because floods on the network can be a significant problem. And because of that, you might want to install an intrusion prevention system, an IPS. The IPS is very good at counting how much information of what type is coming through the network, categorizing it, and stopping when it gets to a particular point. Something like a SYN flood, for instance, someone really trying to overload a server with tons of SYN packets all at the same time. That's something an IPS is exceptionally good at stopping. It's built in almost every IPS you'll run into. Every IPS I've ever seen has a signature for SYN floods, looks for those and is able to stop them. I guess if you have a really old one, maybe it wouldn't, but all the latest, newest, most modern, I mean the last 10 years, can stop a SYN flood or a ping flood or a ping scan. They're looking for these things. That's what an IPS does. It's looking for somebody who's trying the doors. If anybody comes around and they're trying to see if a window is unlocked, and they're trying to see if a door is unlocked, or they're throwing eggs, I will count that. I will let you know when those problems are happening, and I will identify them. Somebody tries, for instance, something like a port flood or port scan. They're really scanning all the different ports available on a device to see maybe what services would be open to the world. This is another good thing that an IPS can help you stop. An exceptional way to prevent those. This is just really some of the most basic functions of an IPS. An IPS obviously has signatures that can stop very well-known or even not so well-known vulnerabilities in an operating system. So if, or an application or something else that is going across the network, it's perfect for an IPS to look for that and be able to stop it. So indeed, if the 46% of you that answered D, IPS, did get that one absolutely right. I think I hit my 50% mark on that one, being able to work through that. 23% of you said router, 18% said switch, 11% ACL, and 2 repeater. Routers have nothing to do with flooding or stopping floods. Neither does switch, at least not inherently. There may be some advanced capabilities in your router and advanced capabilities of a switch, but generally, overall, a router doesn't stop floods. A switch doesn't stop floods. A repeater certainly doesn't, and an ACL doesn't have anything to do with stopping floods. These days, the IPS functionality is usually built into a next-generation firewall. So if you have a modern firewall, it probably has IPS functionality within it, and that IPS functionality is certainly the one that will be stopping those floods from coming through. So again, if you answered DIPS, got that one absolutely right. In fact, if you're watching this for continuing education credit, you already have your Security Plus exam or certification, or you've already got another certification that this might help getting a continuing education credit, you can go to the top or the bottom of my website is a Contact Us link. If you click that Contact Us link, you can put in your name, your email address, which are important because I need to get this back to you, and put in the special code word of the month, which is IPS. That'd be a great way to do it. IPS, and that way when you send that to me, that comes directly to me. You can put anything else in the notes you'd like as well. I read through all of them. And when you send that to me, I will look at the information. As long as you have the code word right, I will send back to you an email that certifies you for 1 hour of a webinar-based continuing education unit. There's different categories that CompTIA uses. So that's one that it's an easy hour, right, to be able to do that. So hopefully it's something that can help you as well. But we're not through our hour. We have more available here, and I have more questions for you. So let's do another question. This question is, which of these best describes a cold spare? Which of these best describes a cold spare? Cold spare. It's obviously a bowling question. Which of these best describes a cold spare? Would it be A, runs it idle until a fault is discovered? B, it's powered on and updated with the latest software patches? C, it's powered down until needed? D, it may be powered, but it's not updated? Or E, it's always active until recovery is needed? One of these best describes a cold spare. This is a concept you do need to know on your exam. The cold spare is a topic comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. This is something I haven't bowled in a long time. I need to work on that whenever I think about what I'm going to do. If you're ever planning redundancy, resiliency, data center implementations, enterprise network implementations, implementing security into an enterprise, you need to take these things into account. Sometimes it's good to have multiple systems. Sometimes you can only have one system. You have to engineer and plan for any contingency. And so you need to understand what a cold spare is and if it makes sense to be able to use in your environment. So that would be something to think about as you're going through those pieces. This is one you probably know. A lot of you probably even have these in your environment. We'll see if you do. Because if we look at the possible answers, well, 82%, that's a pretty good number, said C, powered down until needed. But 8% said it's always active until recovery is needed. And really a tie for second would be A, runs it idle until a fault is discovered. And then a tie for third, which would be powered on and updated with the latest software patches and maybe powered but not updated. So this is one where we do need to know the difference between a hot spare, a warm spare, and a cold spare. A cold spare, it's cold to the touch. It's probably even in a box. It might be in the rack, but it's definitely turned off. It's not even powered on. It is cold. If there was a lightning strike, it would not affect the system because it's probably even unplugged. That's the protection that a cold spare gives you. That if there's something that happens in that rack, there's an electrical problem, it's not going to affect your cold spare. That's one nice part about the cold spare. A warm spare is one that may be racked, it's maybe powered up, but it's probably not connected to the network. It's probably not connected into the system that you're using at the moment. In fact, it may need some software updates to be able to get this up and running to the latest version before you put it into production. So it's almost ready to go. We may have an IP address. We even may be able to access it, but it's not something that's actively being used. And we would have to do some extra work probably to get it to the point of being used. This is very different than a hot spare. Hot spares are powered on, they're updated, they're ready to go. In some cases, the hot spare is one that can immediately take over if it notices a problem with the original. So having that available, that's the ultimate for redundancy and resiliency. That way, if there's a problem, immediately we're able to take advantage of that with the hot spare. So if we go through our list, the 2% said powered on and updated with the latest software patches. I'd call that a hot spare. So that would not be a cold spare. On D, maybe powered but not updated. That would be more of a warm spare. So that would not be the right answer either. Is always active until recovery is needed. That could be both a hot and a warm spare, one of those two. We don't know what status it is, but it certainly is not a cold spare. And A, runs at idle until a fault is discovered. A cold spare, probably not running at all. Probably not powered on a bit. We got to even know where it is. Does anybody know where we kept the cold spare? We aren't even sure because it may not even be in the rack. Powered down until needed is the one. Sort of implied that way with the name cold spare, isn't it? But that is the correct answer. If you answered C, powered down until needed, the 80% of you got that one absolutely right. I think we've got time to squeeze in one more question. So we should absolutely do that. And the question is, which of the following would indicate that your system is infected with a rootkit? Which of the following would indicate that your system is infected with a rootkit? Have you ever gotten a rootkit on your machine? Well, maybe you've been able to know that you had a rootkit. Let's find out. Would it be A, alerts appear from your antivirus software? B, you receive an IPS alert? C is that email messages are bounced back from a remote site? Or D, unusual messages appear on your desktop? One of these would indicate that your system is infected with a rootkit. What would it be? Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Answer the question. Maybe you know about rootkits and what you can expect to see with a rootkit. This is something you'll be expected to know as you're working with these systems. As somebody is an IT professional on the security side, you're going to need to know about antivirus and anti-malware and rootkits and IPSs and antivirus software and email messages bouncing and things on the desktop. And what is this that I'm looking at? What could possibly be causing this problem? You need to know the answers. So maybe, and of course, rootkits are absolutely a topic that is in the CompTIA exam objective, something you need to know as well. Make sure you know about those. I think that a lot of you probably, I'm going to take a sneak peek while we're looking at this. I think a lot of you may even know this one. This one, it probably is one of those questions where you try to take everything you know it isn't and you throw it out. I think it's probably the best example of what this question is. And I rarely do a 4-answer question. The exam itself is usually a 4-answer exam. I put an extra answer in, but rootkits, I wanted to be very clear about what it was and what it wasn't on this question. And as you can see, 67% of you, certainly just over 50%, almost certainly majority, say that unusual messages appear on your desktop. 17% said you receive an IPS alert, 12% said alerts appear in your antivirus software, and 4% said that email messages are bounced back from a remote site. So which one of these would it really be? Are we right this time with the 68, 67, 68% saying it's a rootkit? A rootkit, the name comes from Linux, where if you are the root user, you are the super user. You're the one who has complete control. It's the administrator in Windows. It's root on the Linux operating system. This rootkit is one that applies to all operating systems. It's a term now that's just used for a piece of software that gets into a system and really effectively is modifying the kernel of the operating system. It's getting into the underlying foundation of the OS. And because of that, it almost becomes part of the operating system or really just underneath the operating system, and you won't see it in anything like Task Manager. This is when you really run into problems, because what if you're trying to run an antivirus utility on it? Well, the antivirus doesn't see it. It really is part of the operating system or hidden underneath the operating system. So therefore, it's not something that you're going to find with traditional antivirus. You have to have a very specific rootkit locator. People have to know what the rootkit is. You have to find that rootkit and hunt it out with specialized software, or know what you're looking for to be able to do that. And if we look at the different things that were answers here, A was that alerts appear from your antivirus software. As I just mentioned, antivirus generally doesn't see rootkits. So we know that that's not going to help us at all. You receive an IPS alert. Rootkit information is in the kernel of the operating system. It's not something going across the network. So therefore, it'd be very unusual for an IPS to be able to identify a rootkit. Email messages bounce back from a remote site. Usually the bouncing back of an email doesn't have anything to do with a rootkit that's on your system. It's a problem with that email that you sent to that remote site. So a little bit more of a problem. And D, unusual messages appear on your desktop would be the only answer here that's anywhere close to being correct. That is one that would indicate that your system may be infected with a rootkit, because the rootkit obviously is doing something. It's taking control of some aspect of your operating system. So that's one where the 68% of you that answered D, unusual messages appear on your desktop. Yeah, you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. That's one where you need to know all about rootkits and what you're going to run into. That's something that will help you immensely. Now, if you've gone through these questions and you see things you don't recognize, you're wondering where these came from, they come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. They are extremely detailed. Make sure that you have a copy of these exam objectives. If you don't have them, go to professormesser.com/objectives right now and download them and use them. They should be your checklist before you take the exam to see if you know everything that could possibly be asked of you on the exam. They are more detailed than any other exam objectives you've seen from any other organization. I can assure you of that. Make sure you have them. That's my tip of the month. It's my tip every month for what you're doing. Well, we've come to the end of an hour. I've got a whole nother hour of Q&A coming up. This will be just open phone lines, really, to talk about. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But I've got another study group that we're doing next month. September the 20th will be the next Security Plus study group. On the 6th, I am doing 6th of September, doing an A Plus study group. The Network Plus study group is the Wednesday after that on the 13th. And on the 20th is our next Security Plus study group. If you're watching this after September the 20th, you're wondering when is the next live event, you can always find out at professormesser.com/calendar. I'll tell you all of those pieces. Don't forget about my Security Plus course notes. Great way to support the site. It may even help you pass that exam at professormesser.com/securitycn. Don't forget about following us on Twitter and Facebook, on Instagram. And you type in professormesser.com/Facebook/Twitter/Instagram, and you will find one of these things that are out there. You can also get a 10% discount on your vouchers by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. That's a nice thing to have. Most of the time, there's no discounts available for those. So that's something right off the top that gives you a 10% discount. And of course, my thanks to GTS Learning and their Security Plus Live Labs. You'll find that at professormesser.com/SecLabs. Well, stick around. I've got plenty more. We're going to open up the phone lines, and it's open phone lines. You don't have to talk about security. You can talk about anything, but you could, of course, talk about Security Plus as well. Stick around for that. Otherwise, we will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. It's time to get the phone lines up and running. The formal Q&A is over, sadly. Oh, well, let's get the phone lines up. I'm the only one here, so I'm doing all of the phone line stuff. Let's start the show. Let's see if that's going to work. I've got to log back in. I've got to click on a thing. I've got hello chat room. Yes, I'm seeing all of that. Let's host the show, and I'll give you the phone number in just a moment and the access to those pieces. Let's turn this down, and now I have to call in myself. Oh, I can't show you those pieces. I have to go to my Skype, find that, and call in. And that says, welcome to the thing. Does it? Uh-oh. It doesn't sound good, does it? See, hear that? That's Skype. Oh, Skype. You sound... Oh.
Thank you for calling.
Well, that took some time, didn't it?
Enter your show number.
Well, I'm going to enter my show number by turning this off and typing this thing in. Dun, dun. We'll have this up in just a moment.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I think we all know that's redundant at this point. And we know that because I say it every month.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Nice of you to welcome me to my own chat room. If you'd like to call in the continental United States, you can call a toll-free number, 855-785-7545. You can call right in if you're on Skype anywhere in the world. This is also a Skype free number, toll-free number, so you can use Skype without any Skype minutes. To be able to do that, just Skype to +1 855-785-RJ45. That number again, +1 855-785-7545. So we're going to do some open phone lines. I just opened up the phone lines. We're done with the formal Q&A Socrative thing. So if you've got Socrative, don't have to worry about that piece and getting those available. If you be something to go through, you're welcome to call in and really ask questions about darn near anything, being able to work through those. And we do have some callers, so let's go straight to the phone lines, to the 240 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? There's a lot going on there. Are you there, caller? You're listening to the stream, which sounds really good, by the way. That's a good sounding. And there he goes. He hung up. Had enough of that. Oh, I didn't know you were going to actually pick up the line to do that. Let's go to 251 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Yes, my name is Lawrence.
Hey, Lawrence, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I was asking a question about WGU, Western Governors University.
Okay.
Trying to see if that's a good online school to attend to get a bachelor's.
This is, I don't have a specific answer for you because I'm not affiliated at all with Western Governors University. I'm certainly aware of them because they have a very big IT offering as far as that. And it is obviously a set of public universities. It's not a private or for-profit organization. It's a set of accredited public universities that have gotten together to provide these online courses, which I like that concept of it. But I'm not personally familiar with WGU or the people or anything else there. Only what I've seen associated with them. What I do like is I like the topics that you have to learn. And I've been going through this right now because I've got 2 kids that are in college right now and one that's planning. And some of my kids are interested in IT, but I'll go out to universities like a public university in Florida, and I will look at their offering for information technology. Now, as someone who worked in IT, I know what the important things are. And for me, I don't understand if you're going into getting an IT major, I don't know why you would need to take a year of physics. It's just beyond me that these are the things that we're trying to teach people in our public universities for information technology. I can tell you for IT, you will never use physics. You will never need it at all. I don't know why you'd need a year of it. I could see maybe you do maybe a semester. No, let's do 2 semesters. So I don't know. That's why when I see organizations like WGU and many others that are finally catching on out there, I like the classes that they've designed. They've designed it around what employers are looking for. They've designed it around what people are needing to know when they get into an IT role. And that's the part that it's taking the traditional schools a long time to figure that out. For some reason, they think that you have to build the computer from scratch. I don't know what that's about. Or even better, they give you tons of programming that you have to learn. I worked in IT my entire career and did almost no programming. We have a computer science department for doing the programming. That's really interesting. And people in the chat room are like, that can't be true. And that's absolutely true. I looked at it last night. I looked at this and saw that I needed a year of physics. Just remarkable. So I really, Lawrence, don't have a specific answer regarding WGU other than I've looked through what they're teaching you. And that's absolutely the right direction, I think, for an IT an IT degree, a 2-year or 4-year degree that has something to do with information technology.
Okay, perfect. Do you think it'll be a good degree to have as far as jobs looking for employers?
Well, I can only speak to what I've done through the years. I started with computers right out of college back in the day, in the 1980s. And it was the best decision from a career perspective I ever made because it gave me the ability to do whatever I wanted to do. If I was interested in networking, I pursued that, got a job in networking, learned about that. If I was interested in doing security, I could move to security. If I like databases, I could do databases. If I wanted to do server administration, I could do server administration. A lot of different options available there to make that happen. So I loved having that level of flexibility. Plus, in IT, if you think back to the 1980s, there was no internet. There was no high-speed networking. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no live streaming of something like this. So in that time, which is a really short period of time, I was able to keep learning a lot of very interesting technologies, learning brand new technologies as we went along. Never a dull moment. So if you're looking for a job where you'll just never, ever learn everything there is to know about that job, information technology is definitely for you.
Great, perfect. All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling, Lawrence. That's one of the things I think that the school people are trying to figure out in the chat room. What was the school? It was University of Central Florida. And I think it's because a lot of these schools have put the information technology, that particular degree, they put in the engineering school or they put in the computer science school, and it just doesn't work. That's not what information technology is. They have no idea. They have no clue. Let's go to 413 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, how you doing? A big fan. My name is Carlos.
Hey, Carlos. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I just had a question. I'm about to take my Security Plus exam next week, and I'm a little nervous. In your opinion, what is like the hardest in terms of all the different categories? What is the hardest one that you've seen people struggle with the most?
Security Plus is an interesting certification because it doesn't have a lot of hands-on associated with it. It's a lot of process and procedure, but there are some technical aspects to it. And one that a lot of people, I think, get wrapped around is the encryption piece. This is the last domain of the Security Plus exam. And I think it's because a lot of people haven't had to get down to that level of detail with encryption. And quite honestly, it's very difficult technology. Even as somebody who worked in next generation firewalls prior to doing this full time, I would begin at the implementation of IPsec, SSL decryption, being able to make sure that certificate authorities were signing things properly and getting the certificates configured properly in these devices. It's really a confusing set of technologies for the security professionals. And now there's a whole section on the exam that you need to know. I think, though, that's one of these things that once you spend some time with encryption and the ciphers and understanding how they're used, it starts to click a little better and it becomes much easier. But I think that's one that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling. Appreciate it, Carlos. Good luck. You're going to pass that exam. It's going to get that exam objectives, check off everything on the exam objectives. You will be fine. Let's stick with Florida. 561 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, Professor Messer. This is Ed.
Hey, Ed. What can we do for you?
Well, I have a question regarding RFID chips. There's a company in Wisconsin that is going to implant RFID chips in their employees. And they're going to use it to unlock resources and pay for certain things there. And they claim that they are not going to be able to track the employees' locations because it does not have GPS. But don't the RFID readers log that information in?
This is probably a number of people who are watching this saw this story in June of this company that is implanting an RFID chip inside people's hands. And they gave, if you watch the story, oh my goodness, if you watch the story about this, it's one where the RFID aspect of it was sort of passed over. Of course, none of the news organizations got it right at all. None of them None of them, of course, because on the news, they don't get technology. So none of them got them right. They gave an example, and in real time, I think they did it live on one of the morning shows. They put the RFID chip, it's one of those smaller round ones, right in between the thumb and the forefinger, and they just stuck it right in there. And they gave an example, the person walking up and opening the door with their hand, unlocking the door by placing their hand on the sensor. It recognized who they were and it unlocked the door. Another one is they went up to their drink machine and they ordered something by putting their hand up to it. What was interesting, the company that was doing this was not an RFID company, I don't believe. I think it was a company that needed RFID technology for other things. It was all effectively a big PR stunt. That's all it was. Nobody's embedding RFID chips in their bodies. Nobody would ever do that for the reasons that you mentioned, Ed, is that it's way too easy to track you outside of using these things. Plus, it solves a problem that doesn't exist. How do I open a door today? I use my phone, or I use the lanyard that I'm required to walk around at work with because it has my ID on it. So I've got to carry this thing anyway. Why wouldn't I just use that to open the door? Why am I using my hand? Or I've already got everything I need to know in my phone. Now, these days, we use our phone for everything. If I need to buy something, I use my credit card, which, by the way, is also embedded in my phone, or I use my actual credit card to do it. So it was a great from somebody who was in marketing at one time. I was in awe of the PR that was done around this particular event and how many eyeballs and how many stories they got done about it. It was nothing more than marketing, and they were bringing us all along with the idea that they were rolling out RFID to everybody in the organization. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody's interested in doing that. And if a company is telling you you need this, or I like what they were saying was that it was voluntary. It's voluntary. When has your employer ever told you something was voluntary and meant it? The answer is never. The employer has never told you that something was voluntary and really meant it. So it's one of those cases where the RFID company got some press. The company doing it got some press that really had nothing to do with their company. But any press is good press from a PR perspective. It's not something that's legitimate. People are not going to go for this type of technology. We barely tolerate having our phones. This is how they're going to track us, by the way. They're already doing it. It's our phones. We carry it everywhere. They've made us want to do it. I must play the game on my phone, so they're going to know exactly where I am all the time. I know it does phone calls and stuff too, but it's for playing games. I don't know if many people realize that. So a great story and a beautiful piece of technology, and actually showed the technology pretty well. They embedded it into the guy's hand. He went up to the door. RFID works. But why can't I just do that with a card? So what was your take on it, Ed? Did you really think that the whole story was legitimate?
Well, I did. And then I was wondering if, in theory, if they had these readers, say, outside in the public area, could they not also track your location when you pass one of these readers?
This is where this story got a little bit weird, because they asked the question of the people that were embedding the RFID technology, what if outside of work that people didn't want to be followed? And they, of course, said, well, there aren't any sensors out there that are tracking people to that degree. Well, yeah, not now, not today as we're talking, but could they do that? Absolutely, they could do that. They could put sensors up or share sensor information, which is really how these companies are going to do it. I've got sensors at the mall. I've got sensors at a school. I've got sensors at the grocery store. I've got sensors every store you go into. Wouldn't it be great if just the coming and going of people was something I could track, and everybody could share that data by paying a little bit of what they had? That data is valuable. I'm going to put this information out there, and I'm going to get money for the data of you walking around my store. Of course, I'm going to share that information. So the capabilities, they're absolutely there. So they were fibbing a little bit.
That's what I was afraid of, that would somehow get networked, and then it could track you all over the place.
That's not science fiction. It's not a conspiracy theory. Of course they could do that. And of course they want to, because from a business perspective, I would love to be able to know the instant somebody walks into my store that has either spent money here before, they've been online and looking at this information. This is technology that I was working with at call centers back in the year 2000, where we wanted to be able to track what people are doing, and we're doing a great job of it today. This is just humanizing, sticking it in to not just follow what you're doing online, but follow what you're doing in the real world. And they're trying to humanize it a bit and trying to make it less scary. But all of us security professionals are out here saying we would never do anything like that.
That's very interesting. And thank you for your time, Professor Messer.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate the call. That's one that I can tell you, Mrs. Professor Messer's having none of that. She was very clear with me. She comes from a medical background. She's like, first, don't put that in your body. Secondly, you're not going to track where I'm going. I said, yes, dear. You're absolutely correct. Let's go to 661 area code. Caller, are you there? What's your name? Caller, 66.
Hi.
Hey, what's your name?
My name is Timmy. I'm phoning from South Africa.
Thanks
I
for
just
calling.
wanted to ask you a question. I wrote my N+ recently, so I prepared with your videos, so thanks a lot for that. That's really something I appreciated. I just wanted to ask a question, and it's not necessarily just Security Plus, but I wanted to know the autonomous system numbers that are assigned to a specific autonomous system. How is that used in terms of BGP in between the autonomous systems?
This is probably the most significant time, or the most common time you're going to be using these AS numbers are usually with BGP. That's when we first probably, I think most people become aware of them and start using them that way. And it's mostly done for the internet routing. Being able to find those locations out on the internet is what we're primarily using those for. The Security Plus, the Network Plus, the A Plus doesn't go into it all, but the Network Plus probably goes into it a good bit, but not enough to really give you a perspective. Once you get into some of the Cisco certifications and you're building out a BGP network and you're configuring the autonomous system numbers between all of those ASNs become pretty important. And you actually see how the packets are hopping between all of them. If you've ever set up on your network a connection to the internet through an ISP, then you're probably familiar with the process of going through and getting those and putting them onto your routers. But that's probably the only time that you ever even need to worry about those. So if you're planning to do some routing in your system with those, or you're planning to do more information on learning about BGP and getting some of the Cisco certifications, you're going to be building out networks with all of those ASNs configured, and you're going to watch the packets go back and forth between those sites.
Okay, thanks. I work at an ISP, so I see this stuff at work. That's why I'm a bit interested in this. I work as a help desk technician, so I'd speak with our people on our network operations. And from them, I find this stuff out, and then I try to research it. But I just wanted to ask another question. In N+, you covered the outcomes that CompTIA set out for frame relay, MPLS, all that stuff. I would just like to know how that interacts with your normal routing protocols. What layer of the OSI model would you put it at?
Whenever you start talking about wide area networks, and to follow up quickly on the BGP part, you could spend a lifetime becoming an expert in BGP. I came from a next generation firewall company. We had some system engineers in the field. We had maybe 2 of them that were just BGP experts. Then I think they came from ISPs. They implemented very large scale BGP networks, and probably over OSPF. They had amazing backgrounds in understanding that. They knew those protocols. And it was one of those where they even were learning more about it. They've already done all of this with BGP, and they were still learning about BGP. So it's one of those technologies that you could really spend a lot of time learning. from an aspect of frame relay, MPLS, and those. When you start getting into, you don't see much frame relay anymore. I think it's on the exam because there's a little bit left in there. Frame relay uses these data link control identifiers, these DLCIs, to effectively be the MAC address of the different sites on your frame relay network. So frame relay doesn't have MAC addresses. It's not Ethernet. There's no big MAC address like we're used to seeing on Ethernet. So instead they use just a number you would assign between 1 and 1024, I think it was. I say it was because hardly anybody's implementing frame relay. If you see frame relay these days, it's probably something that's in place and it's just a legacy network that they just aren't changing because there's no need to yet. Although I think probably most everybody has migrated already to MPLS or even better to something like an Ethernet connection at the end station. Frame relay, MPLS, I will put them in the layer 2 category for those, especially when you think MAC addresses are layer 2. Well, DLCIs are layer 2 as well. That's a perfect place to put them. MPLS has a similar mechanism at layer 2 to address things. That's probably where I put that one too. But if you're ever trying to figure out specifics about the OSI model, there will, of course, always be an exception to it. There's a little bit of frame relay that goes down into layer 1. There's really none of frame relay that goes up into layer 3. It's a model. It's something we should use to get a basic idea of where something fits, and I think those two really fit nicely at layer 2. I think, oh, he dropped off. So I was waiting for the delay from South Africa. But I thank you for calling, though. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear from people wherever they are in the world. I'm looking at my schedule. Let's see how we're doing here. Time looks good. Let's go to 860 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Caller. Hi, my name's John.
Hey, John.
From Connecticut.
John from Connecticut. What can we do for you, sir?
Hey, I just want to thank you for all the videos that you do. Without your help, I wouldn't have gotten my A+, Net+, and MCP.
Excellent.
And I am scheduled to take my Security Plus on Monday.
All right.
Just to build off of a previous conversation about school, I actually leave for my bachelor's on Wednesday, and I want to know what your personal opinion is about where school is going and as far as universities and college. In the IT field, and is it a necessity at this point? I know certifications can get you employed, but from what I've researched, I find that the market hasn't really moved on from bachelor's to allow just for certificates to be needed and stuff like that. So I was just curious as to what your inner thoughts were on the whole college situation.
You definitely heard a little bit of it earlier as a father who's ready to shell out some money for college and knows what employers are looking for and what people would expect to see in IT. I don't know about other parts of the world. I don't know about medicine. I don't know about engineering. I don't know about other parts of what people would see, but I know about IT and I know what I've seen over the last number of years that I've been in it. And I look at what universities are starting to do. They're the traditional universities are very slowly starting to get more IT centric. When I went to college, I wanted to get an IT certification. There wasn't one. This was back in the early 80s. It was an MIS degree, a Management Information Systems degree. And what it effectively was is they took some of the things you needed to learn to be a business management major, and they took some of the things you needed to learn to be a computer science major, which is programming, just tons of programming, and they squeezed those together and they called it MIS. Which made no sense because when you get out in the world, you're either going to be programming, you're either going to be computer science where you are programming or designing computer systems, or you're going to be on IT, which is the one that are maintaining, keeping them up and running, architecting the system, architecting where they're going, implementing the wide area networks, setting up the security, running the databases. Those are two very different worlds. The folks in IT don't usually do programming. The folks on the programming side usually aren't setting up routers, switches, and firewalls. They're two really very different. People tend to blend them together. And in other study groups, I mentioned on how people in charge think that everybody should learn to code, that we're really, if you know coding, you're going to be set. They just have no idea. That's not even close to being accurate, true, or any reflection of what is going on out in the real world. So I see some of the traditional universities are they've just not got it yet. And I went through a number of them last night, literally, to see what they were offering, and they just haven't caught on. But I have seen some of the newer environments. My daughter is in a program at what could be considered a traditional university. She's going to the same university where Mrs. Professor Messer got her nursing degree. And she's going and taking an IT degree, which is just spot on with what she needs to know. So that's a really good example of a traditional, although it's a private school, it's a traditional university that really understands what people need from an IT perspective. It's just very depressing to go look at the public universities and try to find one that really has captured what people need to know from an IT perspective, and they're making them do a year of physics. And it just, as a technologist, it just drives me crazy. It's a good thing that none of you were in my kitchen last night hearing me talk about this, or you'd understand just what a rant I was going on. And Mrs. Professor Messer is so nice. She sits there and goes, I know. She just lets me go on for a bit. So you're hearing just the after part of that today. Drives me crazy. Look for schools that are going to give you some practical knowledge in any of the things that I just mentioned: servers, networks, security, databases. If they're not focusing on those things, then they're not teaching you what employers need. And that's where the value is with getting that degree, is you've learned something that you can immediately take to an employer and say, there's a reason you can give me a paycheck every 2 weeks, and this is what it is. There is a number of organizations out there, or a number of people out there, that don't have a college degree. There are exceptions to every rule. I worked with somebody at my last position who didn't have a college degree and was incredibly successful, not just from a career perspective, but from a financial perspective. He had done fantastic. It's one of those where you have to find the right combination for you. I think a degree at a formal university is still very valuable. Employers look for that. And ultimately, if they're teaching you the right stuff, it actually is valuable. It's not just a piece of paper. You've actually learned something you can use. The second thing, of course, certifications. They don't replace a formal degree. A formal degree doesn't replace certifications. They are two very different things, and it's good to have both. You need some type of experience. And I realize when you're in college or you're just out of college, you don't have that piece yet. So you kind of have to rely on those other two to kind of get you through. And the fourth one I've kind of recently added and told people about is networking. Not computer networking, but knowing the people that are in the industry. If you have an opportunity to visit a user group meeting in your area for Microsoft, for Cisco, for a security user group, for any technology user group, get to meet the people there. I guarantee you, you will see those people again as you move around in the industry. Nobody gets a job in IT and stays at that job until they retire. You're constantly moving around. The technology is constantly moving, and you're seeing the same people in your area all the time. Make sure that you get to meet as many of those as possible. So that's my opinion of schools and the things you can do to maximize your chances.
Well, I appreciate your input, and when you mentioned the physics thing, it made me chuckle a little, because I was looking into schools, and I watched a previous video that you had before discussing the same topic, and with the networking, and not computer networking, but with networking with people, I figured what school would give me the best opportunity all around. And of course, I'm going to have to take that physics course, not a whole year, but a semester, and it's just they want to build well-rounded students.
That's what they tell you, yes. They have no clue what they're doing.
It's a give and take. I already went to a technical school and got my it wasn't a degree, but it was just a certificate.
Great.
And now I want to pursue the other half of it. So I just wanted to see what your input was, especially with someone with a lot of experience. And obviously times are changing. I'm 20 years old, and maybe the market will one day not need a degree, or prices will drop in tuition, and then
you never know.
Will go, look for a degree more. It's all a mystery.
It is all a mystery. Well, good luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
When I got a degree in business management, because the MIS degree, I didn't want to do programming. And I at least knew at that point, I was working in a data center, a computer center at the university, and I knew that programming wasn't what I wanted to do. So I ended up just getting a business degree at the time. But even my business degree, I had to take calculus. And I've been in business now the entire time, in a business. certainly in a professional role since I left college, never used any of that calculus. Still waiting to use calculus. So I say that they have no idea. They have a little bit of an idea. They give you just enough, but some things they just, are they filling time? Do they just need to have more course hours? I don't know. Maybe they're trying to figure it out. And they're getting there. It's just a slow go. Let's go to the 301 area code. Are you there, caller? Caller. 301 caller. The 301 area code. I don't have a call screener, by the way, for those of you listening. It's me. I'm the call screener. So be ready. I'm going to stick you back in the queue. Maybe your mic's not on. Maybe you're muted. We'll return you. You've been holding a long time, so I don't want to drop you. We'll come back to you in a moment. Let's go to the 559 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Oh, you know what? I didn't have you turned on. That's why. 559 area code. Are you there, caller?
Hello. This is Matt. How you doing?
Doing good. I feel bad for the last caller who I will go back to in just a moment. What can we do for you, Matt?
Yeah, I have something that pretty much builds on what the previous caller said, and then I have another question for you.
Sure.
Talking about education, I attended a community college and earned 2 associate's degrees, one in cybersecurity and forensics, and one in network security and Linux databases.
Nice.
And now that I'm looking for a job, I keep still being discriminated because they want a bachelor's degree, which I don't intend to pursue. And that's why I'm trying to look for certifications so I can kind of fill this gap. I hope I'm successful doing that. I don't know what's your take on this.
My take on this is you're completely accurate. As employers still want to see that bachelor degree, but I mentioned those 4 things on the last call. If you had 3 of those 4, it would at least help you. The first one being some type of formal education, which you do have, although they're looking for bachelors. You've at least got a 2-year there, so you can you got half credit on that one. We'll say that. Certifications is another part of that. So if you have any certs that you can add to what you already know, most employers, I believe, still do look at that as being something that's valuable. They'll certainly consider it. It's a consideration. It doesn't replace a formal degree. It goes along with a formal degree, and certifications and formal degrees are 2 very different things, obviously. The third would be some kind of practical experience. It's one of those catch-22s at the beginning. If you don't have experience, how are you going to get experience if they're looking for experience? And I get that. And it may be an opportunity that if you know somebody in the family who has a business and you can help with them with their computers, if you can volunteer somewhere to help them with their computers. A lot of the places need help with computers, especially places that have volunteers are usually nonprofits. They don't have money, so they need somebody familiar with the computers to help them keep everything running. That might be an opportunity, and it counts as experience. It goes on your resume. You can talk about your experiences and what you did there. And the fourth one, and probably this is the one that may even help you the most, is that people networking part. Go to a Microsoft user group meeting in your area. Go to a Cisco user group meeting in your area. Go to an ISSA meeting in your area. That's a security group. If there is one in your area, go and meet those people and join those organizations and continue to go to those meetings. They're the people that you're going to meet when you start going to these interviews. And if you know people at the company or they know you, they will be much more willing to hire you because people like to hire people they know. I tell the story in my other study groups where I probably worked at least at 10 or 12 companies throughout my career. That's just sort of the way IT has worked for me. And for the first job I got right out of college, I didn't know anyone at that place that I went to. I knew nobody there. I'm still not sure how I got that job, but I got it. Every other job I got after that, the other 11 or 12 jobs I got after that, I knew somebody who worked at that company in every single case. Maybe it wasn't the hiring manager, but I knew somebody there who could vouch for me or who I could mention that I knew. And It helps. It's one of the primary things I tell people is don't just rely on any one of those 4 things. You need all of them. And sometimes one of them ends up being the thing that puts you right over the top.
I agree with what you're saying. Honestly, I never got a job through the job board. The last job I had it through my college, and I worked for Day Kennedy. And another question I got for you is, I was thinking of buying your labs. I mean, what kind of hands-on implementations can I see there? Can I see stuff like data loss prevention, because I have a multi-year experience, but I never seen such topics, specifically.
It is. The labs, they're not my labs, they're GTS Learning's labs, so I'm just promoting them during my study group. The course content you will run into, they list out everything on that webpage. If you go to professormesser.com/seclabs, it will take you over there. But it has, just very quickly, I'll give you some of them: Trojans and malware protection, establishing host security, protocol analyzers, network vulnerabilities, vulnerability scanning, PKI concepts, certificate management, application security, radius access control, transitive trust and authentication, user rights and permissions, routers, firewalls, spam, DNS, iSCSI, mitigation deterrent, data, it goes on and on and on. So I think they've tried to catch most of the big topics from the Security Plus exam, but it is the Security Plus one's probably one of their more extensive sets of labs. There's a lot of labs in there, and they cover so many different pieces of it, including IDS and cracking tools and ports and protocols and virtualization and clustering and load balancers. It's all in there.
Oh, good to know. Thank you.
Thanks. I
appreciate your time and the effort you put into creating the video for us and all the study group and all the rest. I really find them helpful. So good luck for anything.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you for calling. That's one of those that the labs themselves, I've gone through them myself. There's a lot there. So maybe something I'm going to look at. Now let's go back to 301, who I didn't have potted up at the moment, but now I do. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes. How are you doing today?
Sorry about that. Hi, what's your name?
My name is Antoine. And first, like everyone else, I want to thank you for all your videos and all the information you're putting out there. It's really helped out a lot of people. You're doing a great service.
Good to hear.
Basically, I just have one really simple question. I'm planning on going to take my Security Plus exam on Friday, and I have a question about the labs on the exam. What do they cover, and can you kind of explain to me, how would that work? I've been studying, and I even took another boot camp at ASM. I don't know if you heard about that educational place, and they actually gave me your information to go online and look you up and do all these other things. And I also went through Cyber IT also. I went through some of those courses.
Right. Okay.
So this if you can, answer that for me, and that's pretty much it.
It's a tough one because obviously CompTIA doesn't release information about their exams, and whenever you're ready to take the exam, right, before you even start the exam, you have to sign digitally on the page on the screen that you're not going to tell anybody what's on the exam. So there's this problem with getting information about what the heck is in these performance-based questions. If you go back to my study groups back to January, I started doing a performance-based question on my first question every time. And I can't say that my performance-based questions are a good example of everything you could possibly be presented with. But at the beginning of the year, I think we did configuring a Soho router. I did one with configuring a firewall. We've done port numbers. We've done some matching. We put things in order from highest to lowest. There's a good smattering of different questions out there. They could effectively take any topic from the exam objectives and put it into this, and you would have a question. So it's difficult to know exactly what they would be asking of you on the exam. But I think if you looked at the first question on every study group since January, I think you'd have a pretty good, at least a feel for the type of things that you might be presented with.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I think I'm ready, but I'm gonna do some more studying today and tomorrow, and I think I'll be ready to take that test on Friday. And I thank you again for answering my question.
Thanks, Antoine. Good luck.
Thank you.
That's one where we just don't know. And there are, and once you take the exam, obviously you know, but then you can't say anything because it's part of the candidate agreement. Can't say anything about your exam. You can say you took it. That's about it. The exam, those are very specific restrictions that are in there. Let's go to the 757 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Yes, I am. My name is Steven.
Hey, Steven. What can we do for you?
Yes. Hey, I got a question.
And I tried to get Steven's, move him up on the screen, and it hung up on Steven. So call me back, Steven, and we'll get this. I have a few more minutes left before I have to go. I've got a hard stop today. This rarely happens. Some of you have been on some of my other study groups, and so call back, Steven. I apologize. I've got the number right there. Some of you have been on other study groups that went on for a very long amount of time. Today, we definitely have a hard stop up there and working through those. This is one where also in the chat room, people were talking about what direction to go, what technology schools can do. So this is obviously a topic. We're starting now a new school year. We're going through what people are trying to do with that. So it's natural. People are trying to figure out those pieces. I'm trying to figure out those pieces. My son's I started with community college as well. I got my AA degree and then moved up into a university. It's really difficult making that jump and trying to figure out, now I need to get into a major program. What am I going to do? And that was always a challenge for me to make that happen, especially now. I know now what I would need to have in an IT role. And I want my kids who are interested in IT to now perform, to do that in the role. So try that. See if we can make that work. Stephen has not called back yet. I apologize, Stephen. You are welcome to do so on here. I think I've got this set up to take those calls again. I do. So you're welcome to call back. One of the things that I kept doing, though, is going from school to school to school to school. This is very time-consuming. Many of you have probably already done this already. Pulling up the details, reading through what the details are, and it just gets very frustrating over and over when you're seeing the same type of thing. People have been calling in about it. They have to take physics to get an IT certification, not a computer science program, major, not a computer science major, not a major in computer design, not a major in programming. It kind of makes sense to have some physics if you're doing game programming, for example. It's exactly what that's about. If you know physics, then you can program in the game how the physics is going to work. That's where that came from. If you're in IT, though, you don't need physics. The only physics you need is when you are picking up the router and you're trying to get it into the rack and the router's like 50 pounds. How do you hold it and screw things into the rack at the same time? That's the physics you're going to have to deal with. Let's go to the 662 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? 682. Are you there, caller? Hi, what's your name?
Adam.
Hey, Adam, what can we do for you?
So, I don't know. I just wanted to get a little bit more advice. Like, I'm going to take my Security Plus here soon. I've already taken, I guess, my training for it, but then we immediately dropped into the ICND 1. So I put off some of the Security Plus as far as taking the exam just because I really dug into the Cisco stuff because I liked it. So.
Okay, that makes sense. But now that you're in Cisco, you can see that's a very different set of topics than Security Plus is.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't waste all my time, doing the Security Plus and then jumping straight into Cisco. But that was my curriculum. So. No,
I don't think it's a waste of time at all. Is there a question you have about what to do with that?
Yeah, like I guess my next step is going to be going into just some basic Windows 10 stuff that I'm extremely familiar with. So maybe I could tackle my Security Plus then, or.
Well, it's one of the challenges you have because you're going to be hit with tons of content in the ICND 1 that is completely different than the Security Plus. In fact, with ICND 1, you're going to be doing a lot more hands-on than you ever were doing with Security Plus. So I would recommend, if you're really interested in getting the Security Plus certification, I really recommend that you go out and take that Security Plus certification as soon as you can before you forget everything. Maybe that's something you'd study on the nights or weekends. It's difficult to find time, I realize, but you don't want all of that to go away, and you try to come back to it. It's like starting fresh again.
Yeah, because the labs for the ICND are really intensive, so they're taking up all my extra time that I typically would have to watch your videos and do my flashcards. That's
going to be your challenge. That's going to be it right there, which is Cisco, especially ICND 1 and ICND 2, they're some big certifications. They're nothing like Security Plus, and the topics are completely different than Security Plus. So you're going to need to make a decision. Do you focus on the ICND 1 and ICND 2 and go back to Security Plus later, or do you find some extra time now, batten down the hatches, get all the Security Plus content solid, and go take the certification? If you're in school, you can go to the CompTIA academic store and buy the vouchers for effectively 50% off, half off. That may be something to do to at least take the exam. It won't be a huge financial hit, and you can at least see if that's something you can pass quickly before it all leaves your brain. And he just hung up. I heard he was mobile, so that's probably what happened. I would concentrate on doing that. That way, maybe that's something. It makes sense. He finally called back there. He dropped off the line, but hopefully you heard the last part of that. Does that make sense?
I kind of missed a lot of that, but I guess what you're saying is just, I have a practice. I get 2 vouchers, so basically I can take one just to see where I'm at.
I think that's a fantastic idea. If you've got the vouchers available and you've already gone through all the Security Plus content, you can refresh yourself relatively quickly. Just book it and go take it. In my particular geography, I can book it today and go take the exam tomorrow if I wanted to. So you might want to think about doing that. Pick a weekend, pick some time when you've got a little bit of a gap, study up really quick, go in and see if it's something that you've retained enough that you can pass the exam with.
Yeah, definitely.
The Cisco stuff's going to leave you way back, so you're going to forget everything after ICND 1. Now would be the time to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And just everybody in my class, I just want to let you know I'm rubbing shoulders and letting them know about you. You're a huge help, even in a lot of these.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Trade school kind of. So everybody knows about your name. I think you're out there.
Fantastic. And hopefully that's something that can, I'm doing the easy part, by the way, is, as we've already said, you're now having to do the difficult part of actually learning it and take the exam. So good luck to you and good luck to the folks in your class as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I guess I'll probably, I'm definitely going to pick up your course notes before I take the test for the Cisco stuff too.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And thanks for the support of the website too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you, sir.
Take care. That's one where, for those who haven't gone through the ICND 1 and ICND 2, just the ICND 1, which is the first half of the Cisco CCNA, which is the CCENT, is effectively the certification you get by passing the ICND 1 exam. It's intense. It's a tough exam. If you've never done networking, it's an incredibly hard exam. If you've done networking, it's just a hard exam. So that's one of those things you have to kind of wrap everything up into that single piece and make it happen. So that brings us, I think that covers the call. We weren't able to get Stephen back. I apologize. But if you're out there, Stephen and all of you, if you have a question dealing with Security Plus or careers or any of these other things, there are, of course, a 24-hour chat on my website anytime you go, not just for live events. It's always there. You're welcome to stop in. Many of us are always there and watching the chats that go by, so it's a great place to ask questions. There's forums on the website. You can post a question there. You have people answer from there. And, of course, you can always send me a question directly by going to the Contact Us link at the top of the page and finding out more about I can be glad to answer you personally. Hopefully I have time to do that. I try to get to every question that comes through. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. Well, we've come to the end of another Security Plus study group. I'm sorry that I'm short of time today, so there were a few more people on the lines I wasn't able to get to, but feel free to contact me directly. We can do it again. Don't forget to visit the website. You can, of course, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Just go to professormesser.com/Facebook/Twitter/YouTube. You'll be able to follow exactly what's going on there. Also, Remember that we've got another one of these study groups planned for next month. You can always find out when the next study group is by going to professormesser.com/calendar. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this time, and we will see you next time on the Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group.